The desolate expanse of Caith 9 stretched endlessly under twin moons casting eerie shadows across the Froska dunes. Charlie White stood at the edge of the makeshift camp, his breath forming misty clouds in the frigid air. The planet's harsh beauty was a stark contrast to the warmth of Earth, but after weeks of surveying, he'd grown accustomed to its unforgiving nature. A piercing howl shattered the night silence, causing Charlie to snap to attention. It wasn't the first time he'd heard strange noises on this alien world, but something about this cry seemed different, desperate, almost mournful. "Joe Carey, you hear that?" Charlie called over his shoulder, Hishand instinctively moving to the plasma rifle slung across his back. Joe Foster hunched over and caught a ray of holographic displays, barely looked up. "Probably just the wind playing tricks again, Charlie. These canyons are full of offward acoustics." Carrie Chong, the xenobiologist, paused her specimen cataloging. "I don't know, Joe. That sounded live." The howl came again, louder this time, sending a chill down Charlie's spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I'm going to check it out. You two stay here and keep working on the atmospheric data. I'll radio if I find anything." Charlie White Carey started, but he was already moving, his boots crunching on the icy ground as Charlie trekked across the barren landscape, guided by the occasional echoes of that haunting cry. His Mindrus through potential scenarios. Caith 9 was supposed to be devoid of largiphora. That's why they'd chosen it for their geological survey. If there was something out there big enough to make it sound, it could change everything about their mission. An hour passed, and Charlie found himself at the edge of a steep ravine. The howling had stopped, but no, he could hear something else, a lower rumbling growl interspersed with high-pitched whimpers. Carefully, he activated his night vision goggles and peered over the edge. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Huddled at the bottom of the ravine was a creature unlike anything he'd ever encountered. It was massive, easily the size of a bear, with thick fur matted with ice and grime, but it wasn't the creature's size that struck Charlie. It was the unmistakable features reminiscent of the direwolves from Earth's ancient past. Thelian wolf-like beast was curled protectively around two smaller forms. Cubs, Charlie realized, but his heart sank as he noticed a third cub lying motionless at the bottom of a deep crevice just beyond the family's reach. Charlie's training kicked in, assessing the situation with clinical precision. The adult creature was clearly in distress, its flanks heaved with labored breaths, and even from this distance He could see signs of severe injury and malnutrition. Patches of fur were missing, revealing raw, infected skin underneath. The creature's eyes were sunken and its tongue LED from its mouth, a clear sign of dehydration. Whatever this species was, it didn't belong in Caith 99's harsh environment. Slowly, Charlie began to make his way down the ravine slope. He knew it was risky, but every instinct told him he couldn't leave these creatures to die. Ash got closer, the adult's head snapped up, bearing wickedly sharp teeth and a snarl that reverberated through the canyon. "Easy there, big fowl," Charlie murmured, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature's eyes locked onto him, and Charlie felt a jolt of recognition. There was intelligence in that gaze, a depth of understanding that went beyond mere animal instinct, but there was also fear and desperation. Without warning, the adult lunged at Charlie, its massive jaw snapping inches from his face. Charlie stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding feedback. The creature's movements were sluggish, weakened by its poor condition, but the ferocity in its eyes wasn't mistakable. "Whoa, easy," Charlie shouted, his heart pounding. He raised his hand, showing he was unarmed. "I'm trying to help you," the creature snarled, again placing itself between Charlie and the cubs. It was clear that despite its weakened state, the adult was willing to fight to the death to protect its young. Charlie's mind raced. He needed to gain their trust, but more importantly, he needed to rescue that third cub before it was too late. Hey there, hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel to grow and reach more people. Now let's find out what comes next. Taking a deep breath, he made a decision that went against every safety protocol drilled into him during training. He turned his back on the snarling adult and moved towards the crevice where the motionless cub lay. Their action was instantaneous. A blur-off motion in his peripheral vision was off, warning Charlie had before he felt the impact of the adult's charge. He managed to roll with the blow using the creature's momentum to avoid the worst of its attack, but as he came up in a defensive crouch he realized he'd miscalculated. The adult wasn't attacking him, it was trying to reach its fallen cub. In that moment of shared understanding, Charlie saw his opportunity. "I can help," he said, firmly locking eyes with the creature. "Once more, let me help you." For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, they stared at each other. Then, almost imperceptibly, the adult stepped back. Charlie didn't waste a second. He scrambled to the edge of the crevice, assessing the situation. The cub had fallen onto a narrow ledge about 10 feet. Down it was, breathing, but barely. Using his climbing gear, Charlie fashioned a makeshift harness and began to lower himself into the darkness. The descent felt like it took hours, though it couldn't have been more effin'. A few minutes, Charlie's heart pounded in his ears as he finally reached the unconscious cub. Up close, heckled, see the rise and fall of its chest, yellow but steady. The cub was in even worse shape than its parent, its small body emaciated and covered in frost. Gently, Charlie scooped the small form into his arms, marveling at how something so alien could feel so familiar. As he cradled the cub, he felt a faint pulse of warmth, whether from the creature, his body heat, or something else. He couldn't be sure, but in that moment Charlie knew he'd do whatever it took to save this family. The climb back up was treacherous, made even more challenging by his precious cargo, but finally Charlie hauled himself over the edge, cradling the cub against his chest, heading to face the adult, half expecting another attack. Instead, he found himself transfixed by a sight that would be seared into his memory forever. The massive creature stood stock still, its eyes wide with an emotion Charlie couldn't describe, as Hope slowly, reverently placed the rescued cub on the ground between them. For a moment nothing happened. Then, with a gentleness that belied its size, the adult nuzzled its fallen offspring. A soft wind escaped its throat, and to Charlie's amazement the cub stirred, letting out a tiny squeak. Relief that flooded through him was overwhelming. Charlie sank to his knees, suddenly exhausted. He watched as Thedelt carefully picked up the rescued cub, carrying it back to its siblings, thoughtfully huddled together, and for the first time since he'd encountered them, Charlie saw the tension leave Thedelt's body. Remembering his supplies, Charlie slowly retrieved his pack. Thedelt watched wearily, but made no move to attack. Carefully, he pulled out his canteen and a package of emergency rations. "Here," he said softly, pouring some water into a shallow depression. "And Theric, you need this more than I do." Thedelt hesitated, then slowly approached its makeshift water bowl. It sniffed cautiously before lapping eagerly at the life-giving liquid. Charlie's heart clenched as he watched the creature's desperation. It was clear they hadn't had access to water in days, maybe longer. As the adult drank, Charlie opened the ration pack. The smell of concentrated nutrients filled the air, and the creature's head snapped up, nostrils flaring slowly. Charlie broke off a piece off the dense food bar and held it out for a long moment. The adult stared at the offering, then with aching slowness it stepped forward and delicately took the food from Charlie's hand. The touch of its muzzle against his palm sent a shiver through him, not of fear, but of a wrath, the trust being placed in him. As the adult chewed, Charlie prepared more water and food for the cubs, who watched in amazement as the parent gently nudged its offspring towards the provisions, encouraging them to eat and drink. The smallest cub, still weak from its ordeal, struggled to reach the water without thinking. Charlie scooped it up, cradling it against his chest as he helped it drink from his cued hand. Thedelt tensed for a moment, but made no move to stop him. As the cub's tiny tongue lapped at the water in his palm, Charlie felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him. These creatures, whatever they were, needed help, and he was determined to give it to them. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, Charlie knew he needed to contact this team, but he was reluctant to break fragile peace that had settled over the ravine. The adult creature had curled protectively around its cubs once more, but its eyes remained fixed on Charlie, watching his every Moved slowly, telegraphing his movements, Charlie arranged for his communicator Carrie Joe, said his voice hoarse with emotion. "You're not going to believe what I found. I need you to bring all the supplies you can carry, and Carrie, bring your xenobiology kit. We've got some new friends who need our help." As he waited for his team to arrive, Charlie settled in, keeping a watchful eye on the alien family. Knew that what he'd done, interfering with an alien species, potentially jeopardizing in their entire mission, would have a consequence. But looking at the creatures before him, seeing the trust slowly building in the adult's eyes, heckled and bring himself to regret it. Whatever came next, he was committed. Now these creatures needed him, and somehow knew that humanity needed them too. The adventure was just beginning, and Charlie White was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sound of approaching footsteps made both Charlie and the adult creature tense, but as Carrie and Joe came into view, their arms laden with supplies, Charlie felt a surge of hope. Together, they would find a way to help these magnificent beings, and in doing so they might just change the course of human history. As the first rays of Caith 99 Sharsh sun crested the horizon, Charlie heard the distant whine of the team chauffeur transport. He tensed, glancing at Fran family huddled nearby. Fettles' ears pricked forward, a low growl rumbling in its throat. "Easy, Charlie murmured, holding out a pleading hand. "They're friends. They're here to help." The transport touched down at the edge of the ravine, kicking up a swirl of frost-coated sand. Carrie was the first to emerge, her eyes wide as she took in the scene before her. Joe followed close behind, his arms laden with equipment. "Charlie, what in the name of Car's voice trailed off as she caught sight of Fevrin. "Oh my God." Charlie stood slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Guys, I'd like you to meet our new friends. They're in pretty rough shape and they need our help." Carrie approached cautiously, her xenobiologistings kicking in. Gaze swept over the adult Vran and its cubs, cataloging injuries and signs of malnutrition. "This is incredible," she breathed. "They shouldn't be here, Thisclamate. It's all wrong for them." Joe hung back, his eyes darting nervously between Charlie and the alien creatures. "Are you sure they're safe? Faffing looks like it could tear U.S. apart." "They are scared and hurt," Charlie said firmly, "but they're intelligent. They understand. We're trying to help." As if to prove his point, the adult Vran let out a soft whine, nudging one of its cubs towards the water Charlie had provided earlier. The cub stumbled forward on weak legs, lapping eagerly of precious liquid. Car's professional demore cracked her expression sting. "Oh, you poor thing," she murmured. She turned to Charlie, her eyes blazing with determination. "What do you need me to do?" For the next few hours, the ravine became a flurry of activity. Carrie set up a makeshift medical station carefully, examining each of the Vadran. Her touch was gentle but sure as he cleaned wounds, applied regenerative oil, and administered nutrient injections. Charlie stayed close to the adult, murmuring reassurances and offering comfort. To his amazement, the creature seemed to understand, remaining calm even as Carrie tended to its injuries. Joe, meanwhile, had set up a portable lab, his fingers flying over holographic displays as he analyzed data. Charlie heckled out, his voice tight with excitement. "You need to see this." Charlie reluctantly left the Vran side, joining Joe at his workstation. "What have you found?" Joe pointed to a 3D scan, wrote a ting above his console. "There's a chip embedded in the adult's shoulder. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, definitely not of human origin." Charlie leaned in studying the intricate patterns etched into the chip's surface. "Can you access it, figure out where they came from?" Joe's brow furrowed in concentration as he tapped out a series of commands. "It's heavily encrypted, but wait, I think I've got something." A stream of alien characters flowed across the screen. "It's not transmitting anymore, but there's still some data stored locally. Give me a minute to run it through our translation matrix." As Joe worked, returned to Fevrin. Carrie was just finishing up her face, grim but determined. "They're restabilized," she reported, "but Charlie, they need more than we can give them. Horetha's planet is killing them slowly." Charlie nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Joe's working on decrypting a chip we found. With any luck, it'll tell us where they came from." As iPhone Q, Joe called out, "I've got it. The chip contains coordinates and some basic biological data. It looks like Vesa creatures. The Vakans, according to Theophile, are native to a moon orbiting a Gazgian about 3 systems over. Charlie's shirt raced. They had a destination Acants to save these magnificent beings, but the implications of what they discovered were staggering, so they were brought here deliberately. He said, his voice low with anger, abandoned to die on a planet completely unsuited to their needs. Carr's expression hardened. It's unconscionable. Whoever did this will deal with that later. Charlie interrupted. Right now, we need to focus on getting them to safety. He turned to his teammates, his voice taking on the authoritative tone of a mission leader. Ichno, this isn't what we came here for. Our orders were to complete the geological survey of Caith 9, but I'm asking you both, can we really turn our backs on them? No. Joe shifted uncomfortably. Charlie, I get it. I do, but we're talking about completely abandoning our mission. There could be serious consequences. I don't care, Carrie said fiercely. This is more important than any survey. We have a chance to save an entire family, maybe even gather crucial data about a species we've never encountered off. How can we pass that up? Charlie looked between his 2 friends, then back at the VRS. The adult met his gaze, and in that moment he felt the weight of its trust. This creature, despite all it had suffered, was placing its life and fellows of its cubs in human hands. We're doing this, Charlie said, his voice brooking no argument. Joe, plot a course to those coordinates. Karia, prepare a containment unit and fee transport, something that'll keep them comfortable and safe during the journey. I'll start breaking down camp. As the team sprang into action, Charlie knelt beside the adult friend, slowly telegraphing his movement. She placed a hand on its massive holder. The creature tensed for a moment, then leaned into his touch. We're going to get you home, Charlie murmured. I promise. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Joe reconfigured their transports, navigation systems, plotting a course that would take them far beyond their original mission parameters. Kara transformed the cargo hold into a makeshift habitat, using their limited resources to create an environment that mimicked the Vran's native climate as closely as possible. Charlie, meanwhile, focused on building trust. He worked tirelessly, bringing food and water, cleaning wounds, and simply sitting with the Vran. Slowly but surely he felt barriers between them crumbling as the twin sons of Caith 9 began to set, casting long shadows across the ravine. Charlie knew it. Waste time, all right, he called to his team. Let's move them. Moving the Vran proved to be a delicate operation. The cubs, still weak from their ordeal, were easy enough to carry, but the adult was another matter entirely. Even in its weakened state, it was far too heavy for them to lift. What cave to guide it, Carrie suggested. Coax it into the transport. Charlie nodded, steeling him for what he knew would be a challenging task. He approached the adult friend, locking eyes with it. Magnificent creature. Hey there, big guy, he said softly. I know you're scared. I know this is all strange and new, but I need you to trust me one more time. We're going to take you somewhere safe. Somewhere you and your little ones can heal and grow stronger again. What do you say we'll yoke 'em with us for a long moment? The Vran simply stared at him, then with aching slowness it rose to its feet. Charlie's breath caught in his throat as he fully appreciated the creature's size and power. Even weakened, it was a force to be reckoned with. Carefully, Charlie began chew back towards the transport, maintaining a contact with Fevrin. That's it, he encouraged. Nice, and you see, you're doing great. Step by painstaking step, they made their way up the ravine slope. Twice the adult Vran faltered its strength, nearly giving out, but each time Charlie was there, his voice steady and reassuring, urging onwards. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the transport. The cubs were already settled in the makeshift habitat, curled up together on a bed of thermal blankets. With one final effort, the adult Vran heaved itself into the cargo hold, collapsing beside its offspring. Charlie's legs gave out and he sank to the ground, his back against the transport's hull. He was exhausted, every muscle aching, but a fierce joy burned in his chest. They'd done it against all odds. They'd saved this family. As Carrie and Joe made final preparations for takeoff, Charlie allowed himself a moment to simply observe Theron's. The adult had curled protectively around its cubs, but its eyes remained fixed on Charlie, and in that gaze he saw something that took his breath away. Gratitude, understanding, and Beginnings off thrust, all right team, Joe's voice crackled over the intercom. We're ready for liftoff, better strap, and this is going to be one hell of a ride as the transport's engines roared to life. Charlie felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. They were about to embark on a journey that would take them far beyond the boundaries of the original mission. There would be consequences. He knew questions to answer, superiors to face, but looking at Thever and seeing the way the adult nuzzled its cubs, Charlie knew with absolute certainty that they were doing the right thing. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, humans and Vulcans united by an unlikely bond of trust and compassion. The transport lifted off, leaving the harsh landscape of Caith-9 behind as they soared into the star-studded blackness of space. Charlie felt a sense of anticipation building within him. This was more than just a rescue mission. Now it was the beginning of something much bigger, a chance to change the way humanity interacted with the galaxy around them. With one last look at the Vrans, Charlie strapped himself into the co-pilot seat beside Joe. All right, Hesed, his voice filled with determination. Let's bring them home as the transport accelerate, pushing deeper into uncharted space. None of them could have imagined the incredible journey that lay ahead, or the far-reaching consequences their act of compassion would have for humanity and the galaxy at large. The vastness of space stretched before them, a canvas of infinite black punctuated by the brilliant pin-pricks of distant stars. Charlie White sat at the helm of their transport ship, his eyes darting between the navigation console and their rear-view screen behind him in the makeshift habitat they created in the cargo hold. The Vran family rested, unaware of the growing tension on Thebridge. Charlie Joe's voice cut through the silence tight with barely contained alarm. We've got a problem. Charlie shins tightened on the controls. What is it? Joe's fingers flew over his console, bring up a holographic display. Fat flickered to life between them. I'm picking up a signal. It's faint, but it's definitely there. A ship just dropped out off FTL near Caith-9. Carrie leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Could it be a coincidence? Maybe another survey team. Joe shook his head grimly. The energy signature matches the data we pull it from the VRAN's chip. It's them, the ones who abandoned our friends down there. A chill ran down Charlie's spine. He thought of the VRANs, of the trust they'd placed in him and his team. They've come back to finish the job. Hesed, his voice low and filled with determination. Well, we're not going to tell it that happened. As if on cue, an alert blurred from Joe's console. They've detected us, he shouted. They're powering weapon systems. Charlie's mind raced. Years of combat training kicking in. Carrie, get back there and secure the Vran. Joe, divert all non-essential power to shields and engines. We're getting out of here. The transport ship lurched as Charlie pushed it to its limits, accelerating away from Caith-9 and the approaching threat behind them. A brilliant beam of energy sliced through space they'd occupied mere seconds before. That was too close, Joe muttered at his fingers dancing across his console. Charlie, we can't outrun them forever. This ship wasn't built for combat. Charlie gritted his teeth, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that strained the transport's structural integrity. We don't need to outrun them forever. We just need to reach the nearest jump point. Another blast rocked the ship and alarms blared throughout the cabin, shields at 60%. Joe called out, we can't take many more hits like that in the cargo hold. Carrie struggled to keep the Vrans calm. The adult's eyes were wide with fear, its massive body curled protectively around its cubs. It's okay, Carrie soothed. Even a another impact shook the ship. We're not going to let anything happen to you back in the bridge. Charlie's mind raced. They needed a plan, and fast. Joe, what's the nearest system with a Galactic Alliance presence? Joe's fingers flew over his console. Proxima Centauri. It's a long shot, but if we can make it there, we might have a chance. Charlie finished plot. Of course, I'll try to buy us sometime with a series of daring maneuvers. Charlie piloted the transport through a dense asteroid field. The pursuing ship, larger and less maneuverable, was forced to slow its advance, but their reprieve was short-lived. They're charging some kind of energy weapon, Joe shouted. I've never seen readings like This before Charlie shirt pounded in his chest. They were out of options with a silent prayer, hepished the transport's engines. Beyond their safety limits, the ship groaned in protest but surged forward just as a massive energy beam lanced out from there. Pursuer time seemed to slow as the beam approached. Charlie could feel the heat of it even through the ship's hull, but at the last possible moment, their transport slipped into the swirling vortex of a jump point, the energy beam passing harmlessly through. The space theat occupied a fract of a second buffer as the chaotic energies of HFY travel enveloped them. Charlie allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew their troubles were far from over. "Joe, get me a secure channel to Alliance Command," he ordered. "We need to report what's happened and request assistance." As Joe worked to establish the connection, Charlie made his way back to the cargo hold. The sight that greeted him there made his heart clench. The adult Vrin was trembling, its eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. The cubs whimpered softly, pressing close to their parent. Charlie approached slowly, his hands held out in a gesture of peace. "I'm sorry," he said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but I promise you, we're going to keep you safe." To his amazement, the adult Vrin's trembling subsided. It met Charlie's gaze, and those alien eyes he saw a glimmer of understanding and trust. Carrie joined him, her face pale but determined. "What now, Charlie?" He took a deep breath, steeling him for the challenges ahead. "Now we fight not just for the Vrin, but for every species that's been exploited like this. It's time Phillians faced the truth about what's happening out here on the fringes." As if in response to his words, Joe's voice crackled over the intercom. "Charlie, got Alliance Command. They're not happy." Charlie squared his shoulders. "Patch them through down here. They need to see what we're fighting for." The air shimmered as a holographic projection atterrizzled in the cargo hold. The stern face of Admiral Ledger, head of Alliance operations in this sector, appared them white. "You'd better have Adam good explanation." For the Admiral's words died in his throat as he took in the scene before him. His eyes widened at sight of the Vrin. "What in the name of all that's holy is going on there?" Charlie stepped forward, his voice steady and determined. "Admiral, we've uncovered something that goes against everything the Alliance stands for. These beings, Fevrin, were abandoned on a hostile world, left to die, and the ones responsible are part of the Alliance." Went on to explain everything they discovered, from finding the Vrin on K9 to the Protson to the Proton. The Alliance went on to explain everything they discovered, from finding the Vrin on K9 to the Proton Conding in Dane pursuit by the mysterious ship. As he spoke, the Admiral's expression shifted from anger to shock and finally to a grim determination. "This is unprecedented," Ledger said finally. "You realize the diplomatic nightmare you've potentially unleashed with all due respect, sir," Charlie replied. "I think we have a chance to do something truly important here." "Tashavet, the Alliance stands for more than just political convenience. We have a chance to be better." There was a long moment of silence as the Admiral considered Charlie's words. Finally he nodded. "All right, White, you'll have our support. Make for Proxima Centauri Station. I'll have a security detail waiting to escort you and your passengers." As the hologram flickered out, Charlie felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They weren't out of danger yet, but for the first time since this wild journey began, felt hope. Carrie placed a hand on his arm, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Charlie. You've given them a chance." Hess shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "We did it, all of us, and this is just the beginning." As if understanding the gravity of the moment, the adult Vrin let out a low melodious howl. It was a sound unlike anything Charlie had ever heard, part mournful, part triumphant song. The cubs joined in, their higher-pitched voices blending with their parents in a haunting, harmonious sound filled the ship, reverberating through its metal halls and seeping into the very hearts of the human crew. In that moment, Charlie knew with absolute certainty that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They were witnessing the birth of a new understanding between species, a bridge across the vast Gulfs of space and biology. As the Vran song faded, Charlie had turned to his team. All right, let's get ready. We've got a long journey ahead of us, and I have a feeling it's going to be on for the history books. With renewed determination, the crew of the small transport ship set a course for Proxima Centauri. Behind them, the vastness of space stretched out, full of both danger and promise, and within their ship an unlikely family of humans and aliens shuttled together. United in their hope for a better future, the pursuit wasn't over. Charlie knew the mysterious ship would be hot on their trail as soon as they emerged from FTL, but for now, in this moment of respite, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what they accomplished. They had saved lives, challenged the status quo, and set in motion events that could reshape the very fabric of galactic society. Yes, he settled back into the pilot. See, Charlie's resolve hardened. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles he would face, he knew one thing for certain: they would face them together, humans and Vran alike, and in doing so he would show the galaxy the true strength of compassion, the unbreakable bonds that could form between even the most unlikely of allies. The stars streaked by outside the viewports, a testament to the vast distances they had yet to travel. But within the ship, a new kind of space was being bridged, the space between species, between worlds, between hearts. It was a journey that would change not just their lives, but the very course of galactic history. And as the transport ship hurtled through the cosmos, carrying its precious cargo of hope and possibility, Charlie White couldn't help but feel that they were on the cusp of something truly extraordinary. The adventure was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The Proxima Center system loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the vast emptiness of space. Charlie White's hands were steady on the controls of their battered transport ship, but his mind raced with the enormity of what lay ahead behind him. In the makeshift habitat, the Vran family huddled together, their alien eyes wide with a mixture of fear and trust. We're approaching the jump point, Joe called out, his voice tight with tension. But Charlie, I'm picking up another signal. They found us. Charlie's jaw clenched. They were so close. How long until we can make the jump? 2 minutes, Joe replied, but they'll be in weapons. Rang in less than one. Car's voice crackled over the intercom from the cargo hold. Charlie, the Vran are agitated. I think they can sense something's wrong. Hold them steady, Charlie ordered. We're almost there. The ship shuddered as the first volley of energy blasts from their persuade grazed their shields. Alarms blared throughout the cabin, and Charlie's hands flew over the controls, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that strained the transport to its limits. Shields at 40%, Joe shouted. We can't talk much more of this. Charlie's mind reset. He needed a miracle, or at least a really good trick. His eyes fell on then of computer, and a crazy idea began to form. Joe, how close are we to Proxima Sense gravity? Well, Joe's fingers danced across his console. We're just entering the outer edge. Charlie, what are you thinking? A grim smile played across Charlie's lips. Something stupid and brilliant. Dift all power to the forward shields and hold on tight. With a sharp bang, Charlie aimed their ship directly at Proxima Cantor's blazing surface. The pursuing vessel caught off guard by the suicidal maneuver, hesitated. For a crucial moment, Charlie were going to burn up. Cars panicked voice came over the sea. Not today, Charlie muttered. At the last possible second, he cut the main engine S and fired the maneuvering thruster, using Proxima Sense immense gravity tossing shot them around the star. The forces were immense, threatening to tear the ship apart, but Charlie's calculation were perfect. They emerged on the other city of the star, their velocity nearly doubled. Behind them, their pursuer struggled to match the maneuver, its larger mass working against it. Jump point in range, Joe shouted triumphantly. Punch it, Charlie ordered. Familiar disorientation of Fiatil travel washed over them, and then they were through, emerging in the space above Proxima Center Station. A fleet of Alliance ships hung in orbit, their weapons trained on the jump point. Admiral Ledger's voice crackled over the sea. What, you crazy son of a, get your ship docked immediately. We'll handle your pursuer. As they maneuvered towards the station, Charlie allowed himself a moment of relief. They'd made it against all odds. They'd brought the Vran to safety. The next few hours passed in a blur. Of debriefings and medical exhumations, the Vran were taken to a specially prepared habitat designed to mimic the conditions. Of their home moon, Charlie and his team were hailed as heroes by some and reckless vigilance by others, but the real challenge was yet to come. 3 days after their arrival, Charlie stood before the Alliance Council, the fate of the Vran and potentially the future of interspecies rations hanging in the balance. Mr. White, the Arcturian representative, began her crystalline form shimmering in the chambers as light. While your actions were undoubtedly brave, they have placed the Alliance in a precarious diplomatic situation. The Zari Imperium is demanding the return of what they claim is their property. Charlie's fists clenched at the side's property. He spat. We're talking about sentient beings here, beings that were abandoned to die on a hostile world. Human representative. A stern-faced woman named Admiral Wilson leaned forward. Be that as it may, Mr. White, we have no formal laws governing the treatment of non-allied species. The Zaraki argue that the Vran are a genetically engineered species create for their purposes. A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber. Charlie felt sick to his stomach. Created or not, they are alive. They feel pain, fear, love. Eve. Seen it with my own eyes. Are really going to stand by and allow this kind of exploitation to continue? The chamber fell silent. Viewed of the decision palpable in fear. Then, to Charlie's surprise, the Vran adult was brought into the chamber flanked by a team of xenobiologists. Its eyes immediately found Charlie, and a low mournful sound filled the air. The effect on the council was immediate. Many leaned forward, their expression softening as they witnessed the obvious intelligence and emotion in the creature's eyes. Charlie sees the moment. Members of the council, I ask you, really look at this being before you. Yes, they're different from us. Yes, their origins may be unlike our own, but can any of us truly say they're less deserving of life, of freedom, of dignity? He took a deep breath, his voice growing passionate. Humanity's own history is stained with the exploitation of those we deem lesser. We nearly destroyed ourselves before we learned better. Now we have a chance to prevent that same tragic history from repeating on a galactic scale. The Vran, as if sensing the importance of the moment, let out a haunting melody that echoed through that chamber. It was a sound of longing, of hope, of a fierce desire for life. One by one, the council members began taunted. Admiral Wilson spoke first. Mr. White is right. We cannot claim to be a force for good in this galaxy. If we turn a blind eye to such blatant cruelty, I move that we not only deny the Zerai request, but that we begin drafting legislation to protect all sentient species, regardless of their origins. The vote was unanimous as the council dispersed. Charlie approached the Vran. He placed a hand gent on its massive shoulder, feeling the creature lean into his touch. Did it, he murmured. You're going home. Fifth journey to the Vran's home moon was bittersweet. Charlie and his team had grown deeply attached to the alien family, and the thought of saying goodbye weighed heavily on their hearts as their ship entered orbit around Vidai, the ice-covered moon that the Vran called home. Charlie was struck by its haunting beauty. Vast plains of blue-white ice stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by jagged mountain ranges that gleamed like crystal in the pale light of the gas giant. The moon orbited. They landed in a valley sheltered from the howling winds, their ship's senses having detected a larger concentration of Vran life signs in Theria as the cargo bay doors opened, letting in a blast of frigid air. Charlie felt a lump form in his throat. The adult Voden stood at the threshold, its cubs pressed close to its sides. For a long moment it simply stared out at the sea landscape, its chest heaving with deep breaths of the familiar cold earth, and with a sound that was half howl, half song, it bounded down the ramp. The cubs followed, their excited yips echoing across the valley. Charlie and his team watched in awe as the family rolled in snow, their joy palpable even across species barrier. But the Vran Shama coming was far from over. From the surrounding ridges more of their kind appeared. Massive wolf-like creatures with thick silvery fur and eyes that gleamed with intelligence. They approached cautiously at first, but as they caught the scent off their long-lost kin, their pace quickened. The reunion that followed wasn't like anything Charlie had ever witnessed the air filled with a cacophony of howls, yips, and that haunted melodic song, the Vran. Greeted each other with gentle nuzzles and playful tumbles, their bodies vibrating with the sheer joy of being together. As Charlie watched Ed, felt a presence at his side, he turned Ed to find the adult Vran, the one they rescued, the one who had trusted them against all odds, standing beside him, its eyes so alien yet so expressive met his. In that moment, a wave of emotion passed between them, gratitude, respect, and a deep abiding affection that transcendeth barriers of species and language. The Vran leaned forward, gently pressing its forehead against Charlie's in a gesture that needed no translation. "You're welcome," Charlie whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "and thank you for trusting us, for showing us what's real." I implored with a final soft whine. Fevrin turned and loped off to join its pack. Charlie watched it go, his heart full to bursting with a mixture of joy and sorrow. Carrie placed a hand on his shoulder, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We did good, Charlie, we did real good." Joe nodded. "Unchiraculous is quiet, so what? No, back to business as usual." Charlie shook his head, a determined glint in his eye. "No. Now we make sure this never happens again to any species anywhere in the galaxy." As they prepared for takeoff, Charlie took one last look at the Vranth family they'd rescued, was no surrounded by their pack, finally home, finally safe. It was an image he knew he'd carry with him for the rest of his life. The ship lifted off, leaving behind the icy world and its remarkable inhabitants. But as they set a course back to Alliance space, Charlie knew Thathis wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. They had sparked a change in the galaxy, a ripple that would grow into a wave, and whatever challenges lay ahead, political battles, resistance from Thasu who profited from exploitation, the sheer enormity of changing hearts and mind, sacrifice countless worlds, Charlie knew they would face them hidden because they had seen firsthand the power of compassion, the strength that came from reaching a sea Ross. The gulf of species to forge bonds of trust and understanding, and in a universe vast and often cold, that warmth was the most precious resource of all. As Vera faded from view, Charlie settled into the pilot seat. This resolve hardened. The real work was just beginning, but with the memory of the Vran song echoing in his heart, he was ready for whatever the galaxy might throw their way. The Grand Assembly Hall off. The Galactic Alliance hummed with tension, representatives from 100 different species filled the tiered seats, their diverse forms a testamento the vastness and variety of life in the cosmos. At the center of it all stood Charlie, white, flanked by Carrie and Joe, their faces set with determination. Admiral Wilson, the human representative to the Alliance, stepped forward. "Esteemed colleagues, we are here today to address an issue that strikes at the very heart of what this Alliance claims to stand for. The exploitation and abuse of sentient species cannot be allowed to continue." I yield the floor to Charlie White, whose recent experiences have brought this critical matter to our attention. Charlie took a deep breath, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. He thought of the Vran, of their haunting song, and the trust they had placed in him. With that memory steeling his resolve, he began to speak. "Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Alliance, I stand before you not just as a human, but as a witness to both the depths of cruelty and the heights of compassion that sentient beings are capable of." His voice amplified by the chambers. Acoustics rang clear and strong. "We recently encountered a species known as the Vrans, abandoned on a hostile world by those who saw them as nothing more than property to be discarded when no longer useful." A murmur of discomfort rippled throughout the assembly. Charlie continued, his voice growing more impassioned. "But let me tell you what I saw in the eyes of these beings. I saw intelligence, emotion, the capacity for love and fear and hope. I saw individuals worthy of dignity and respect, not commodities to abused and discarded." He gestured to the holographic display that sprang to life behind him, showing images of the vacant sphere reunion on VRA, the obvious joy and affection they shared with their unkind. "Look at them," Charlie urged. "Really look. Can any of us truly say they are less deserving of protection than ourselves?" The Zerai representative, a tall insectoid being chittered in agitation. This is preposterous. Thevacans are an engineered species. Create for a purpose, they are property, nothing more. Charlie's eyes flashed with anger, but he kept his voice level. And who gave AO the right to make that determination to play God with the lives of sentient beings? He turned back to the assembly at large. My own species, humanity, has a long and painful history of justifying the exploitation of those we deemed lesser when enslaved our own kind. Destroyed ecosystems drove countless species to extinction, and each time we found ways to rationalize our actions. To convince yourselves that those we exploit weren't really people in the way we were. The chamber had grown deathly quiet, very being hanging on Charlie's words, but we learned. We grew, we came to understand that diversity of species, our thought of ways of being is not a threat but our greatest strength. And now we have the chance to apply that hard-won wisdom on a galactic scale. Charlie's voice softened, filled with emotion. I have looked into the eyes of a grandmother as she protected her cubs. I have heard their songs of joy and sorrow. I have witnessed their capacity for trust even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. They are people as surely as any of us in this chamber. He straightened his gaze, sweeping the assembly. We stand at a crossroads. We can choose to be a force for compassion and justice in this galaxy, or we can turn a blind eye to suffering and exploitation. The choice we make today will echo through the ages, shaping the very soul of this alliance. As Charlie stepped back, the chamber erupted into heated debate. Species that had long profited from the exploitation of others argued vehemently against any change. Others, moved by Charlie's words, spoke up in favor of new protections. For hours the debate raged. Charlie and his team watched, their hearts in their throats, as the fate of countless beings hung in abeyance. Finally, Admiral Wilson called for a vote on a new set of laws. The Sentient Rights Accord. As the votes were tallied, Charlie felt a hand slip into his. He looked down too. Sikari, her eyes shining with unshed tears. On his other side, Joe stood rigid, his usual sarcasm replaced by tense anticipation. The results appeared on the massive screen at the front of the chamber. For a moment, Charlie's heart sank. The vote was nearly split, but then as the final tallies came in, a roar of approval swept through the chamber. The Sentient Rights Accord had passed. By then, aroused of margins, Charlie sagged with relief, feeling the weight of the past weeks finally lift from his shoulders. He had done it. They had changed the course of galactic history. In the days that followed, the implications of the new laws began to ripple out across Alliance space. Species that had long been exploited were suddenly granted protections. Corporations that had built empires on the backs of sentient property found themselves facing legal challenges. It wasn't an easy transition. There was resistance, even violence in some sectors, but slowly, surely, a new era of interspecies relations began to dawn. 3 months after the historic vote, Charlie stood on the observation deck of Proxima Centauri Station, gazing out at stars. So much had changed, and yet the galaxy spun on, vast and indifferent. Felt a presence beside him, and turned to see Admiral Wilson. The older woman's face was etched with new lines of care, but her eyes shone with pride. You've started something remarkable. Charlie said softly. It won't be easy, but we're in the right path. Charlie nodded, his thoughts drifting to Thevrin. I keep wondering if we did enough, if they're truly Safino. Wilson placed a hand on his shoulder. We can never guarantee absolute safety for anyone in this universe, but we can strive to create a galaxy where compassion and respect are the rule, not exception, and that's exactly what you've done. As if in response to her words, a notification chimed on Charlie's comm device. He activated it, and a holographic image sprang to life. A message from VR. At Charlie's breath caught in his throat. There, amid the swirling snows of the Varan home world, stood Thefamly. He had rescued the cubs, now noticeably larger, gamboled playfully in the background. But it was the adult that held his attention. It stood tall and proud, its eyes seeming to meet Charlie across the vast gulf of space. And then, faintly but unmistakably, came the sound of its song. Not a cry of loneliness or fear, but a joyous, triumphant Melody that spoke of hope and new beginnings. Tears pricked at Charlie's eyes as the message faded. He turned back to the star-filled vista before him, a smile tugging at his lips. "You know, Admiral," he said softly, "I think we're going to be all right." As they stood there, gazing out at the infinite possibilities that lay among the stars, Charlie felt a sense of peace settle over him. The journey wasn't over in many ways, it was just beginning. There will be challenges ahead, new frontiers of ethics and understanding to navigate, but they had taken the first crucial step. They had chosen compassion over convenience, empathy, air exploitation, and in doing so they had not only saved her, but had set in motion changes that would reshape the very fabric of galactic society. Charlie thought of all beings out there in the darkness, those known and those yet to be discovered. Thanks to their actions, those beings now had a chance at a future free from the threat of enslavement and exploitation. It wasn't a perfect solution. The galaxy was too vast, too complex for any single action to solve all its problems, but it was a start. A beacon of hope in the cosmic night. As he stood there, Charlie made a solemn promise to the Vran, to all the beings who had yet to find their voice in the galactic community, and to himself. He would continue to fight for what was right, to push the boundaries of understanding and compassion, because that he realized was true legacy of humanity, not conquest or domination, but the capacity to grow, to learn, to extend the hand of friendship across the stars. The observation deck felt silent, but in Charlie's mind the Vran song continued to echo, a reminder of what they had accomplished and a call to all that lay ahead. Hey there again. I'm glad you've come so far. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button. This is Real I Import to the channel Real I Import, and I have one more thing for you. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here or here if you want the whole playlist. See ya there.